All right, I'll turn the mic on. Let me know if you can't hear me or see or anything. So I'm going to be talking about Area 51 and aliens, and the question is another UFO disinformation scandal. So I'm not saying that, and there was a little bit of a misprint in that it said new evidence showed that this is disinformation. I'm saying there is some new information, and I'll be sharing that with you. I don't know that it necessarily proves that there's disinformation going on here, but I say another UFO disinformation scandal because there is a well-documented disinformation scandal out there. And I'm going to cover that, but I also want to show some parallels between that case and this case to make us think. I mean, a lot of people think about, Bob Lazar and what might be going on there. Most theories are that there really are UFOs and aliens in Area 51. Or there's the other side, that it's all lies and none of it's true at all. But a lot of researchers behind the scenes kind of think, well, what if we're being tricked? What if there's some kind of disinformation going on here? And so I want to explore that a little more closely and look at that and compare it to a case where we know disinformation went on. We don't know necessarily. There was government involvement, but I'll show you the evidence and the information, and you can decide yourself what you think. So let's take a look. First of all, my Area 51 cred largely is because I got to take, this is something that no one will ever be able to take away from me. I got to take the Kardashians to Area 51 for the first time that they visited. So there's me with Kylie and the crew. Kylie looks a lot different these days, even though that was just a couple years ago. But I have to say, and people always tease me because I say this all the time, that they were really nice. They were really cool. I went out there with Travis Walton, someone we are talking about. So Travis Walton, they called and they asked, hey, we want to go to Area 51. No problem.
Wore that one out already.
Yep. And they were like, can you take us out there? And they also wanted to hear about a credible kind of alien case. They wanted something really weird with aliens, but they were like, is there anything credible out there? And I told them, well, I think the Travis Walton case is pretty credible. It's as credible as they get. And they're like, yeah, are you sure? We're not sure about that. And I said, well, let me bring him out, and you can talk to him and see what you think. So we went out there, and some of you might have seen the show. You might have not. But they loved it. I mean, they were fascinated with what Travis had to say. And if for those who aren't familiar, Travis Walton in 1975 was with his colleagues out logging in Arizona. When they saw a light in the forest, they went to check it out. It was a large silver object that they saw. It wasn't a fire. Travis ran towards the object, trying to be just being a goofball. And at one point, he crouched down. Then he decided, I better not do this. This probably isn't a good idea. His colleagues were freaking out, telling him to get back to the truck. When he stood up, he felt this force hit him, and he was thrown several feet. His colleagues thought he was dead, so they raced off. There was a big manhunt that ensued, and he came back 5 days later, and all of these people have passed lie detector tests and things like that. And the most credible thing about this story is talking to Travis himself. I've known him for many years, and the story remains the same, and he's just one of those down-to-earth people. And so they loved it. They were very nice. It was a lot of fun. It was pretty cool. But let's talk about Area 51. First, I'm going to review not just a little history, but one of the cool things that has happened lately is Bob Lazar has not really spoken to a public forum about his experiences. Bob Lazar, who we'll review, is the whistleblower who says he worked on alien technology at Area 51. But he did recently at the UFO Congress in February. It's the first and probably the last time he'll do it. So I've got some clips here where we'll talk about what he had said. And since then, there's actually been some new information. But just to quickly give some history on Area 51, this is a picture of it. Essentially, and this is a image up here on the right. But first, the mystery. How did it start? It started with the news media right here in the Las Vegas area. KLAS, this is actually an article from the Weekly World News and a tabloid. A lot of the tabloids back then, though, they used to be a little more credible. This story was about the work of some journalists, including a journalist at KLAS, who had been researching Area 51. They essentially had some engineers who lived in Las Vegas but worked out there, who had told them, we're working on this secret stuff at this base. It's called Area 51. Whenever they told stories like there'll be a big alert that will come on and we have to hit the deck. We have to hide our eyes when an aircraft goes by or something so we can't look at it. So these really wild stories about these secret projects out in the desert. It didn't really pick up speed. It was kind of a Las Vegas story. It was kind of an aerospace kind of geek story. It wasn't really big in the public at this point, but that's when it started getting reported way back then. People would go out to, this is an example, this is when I was out there with the Kardashians. I took this picture of the signs. They used to be a little more threatening, where they said, they'd use deadly force if you pass this line. Now they're just kind of warnings, and they say you're going to get in trouble. And you see these trucks up here watching your every move when you're out there. And you don't want to really cross that line. Some people have. And essentially, it's the local police force who's in charge of, so that you'll be detained, and then the local police force will come and you'll go to jail. There have been some people who have passed that line. Also, some of you might have seen these, especially the locals. This is what's called Janet Airline. They're actually ran by, I believe, Halliburton, and it's just kind of a nickname, Janet. But these are the unmarked airplanes that take the workers from Las Vegas out to Area 51. So I took this picture just a couple years ago from the airport. There's actually a place in the parking lot where you can see perfectly out to the area. You see the Luxor right behind, and you see the planes out there. And it was kind of neat. I stayed at the Tropicana once, and you can see those planes, and you can see when they come and go. Some people have it scheduled. And I was talking to the museum here. They said they fly right over, actually. So they're able to see them when they do go. So Area 51 was just a rumor for a long time until it was finally declassified. So this is a story about the declassification. What happened is, in 1998, there was actually, prior to that, this document that came out. It's called the Central Intelligence Agency and Overhead Reconnaissance. This document is all about the U-2 and some of the planes that were developed out in Area 51. However, the term Area 51 was still classified when that document came out. And so they would not confirm that Area 51 existed. In 1998, they officially released part of that document. However, most of it, or much of it, anything having to do with Area 51, was redacted. So in other words, it was blacked out. In 2013, finally, they unredacted some of the material and the name Area 51, so now everybody knew Area 51 was real. These are some examples of the document, and this document does tell you, now that it's an interesting part, now that those are unredacted, the history of Area 51. So essentially it was 1955. They went to go look for places that were secluded where they can build the U-2. They found, here the National Energy Department had this area out here where they were testing nukes, essentially. And near there, they found this lake bed that had an airstrip, and that's when they started. You could see the old version in 1998 had Area 51, and even a reference to a dry lake bed blacked out. A picture of Area 51 here was blacked out in 1998. And then here you see some whole pages were blocked out. And you see here the image on the right, similar to the 1980 story, which shows where Area 51 was.
Where's the new land that they're buying now?
What's that?
They're buying all new areas around here now.
Yeah.
I
So
was wondering where it was.
just lots of surrounding areas, just some. There's a big story right now you probably heard in the local news where there was actually a mine out there that all the area around it was bought up, and then now they're finally annexing the mine, and there's a big fight with the family there. But they do continue to annex land. So for instance, there are peaks you could hike out to and you could see in and take some big pictures, and we'll see some of those pictures that were taken in a minute, but those all have been bought up. So they keep buying land around there as they obviously keep developing top secret aircraft out there. There are some people who are able to look at pictures and do analysis and see that they're still building buildings out there at Area 51. So with the declassification, this is kind of an interesting video that happened soon after.
Now, when you first become president, one of the questions that people ask you is, what's really going on at Area 51? When I wanted to know, I called Shirley MacLaine. I think I just became the first president to ever publicly mention Area 51. How's that, Shirley? So, we love Shirley MacLaine.
So here he was, this was the Lincoln Center Awards, and Shirley MacLaine was one of those people getting awards. And for people who don't know, Shirley MacLaine has been into UFOs and paranormal phenomena for a long time, so that's why he mentioned that. And indeed, he was the first president to mention the name Area 51. He's not the first to talk about Area 51. Bill Clinton's actually talked about it quite a bit, and he's often mentioned how he was interested in UFOs and how he had his staffers go check out the base out in the desert. He usually refers to it. He doesn't use the term Area 51, but he says they didn't find anything. The only thing they're doing out there is building high-tech aircraft. The only thing. That's pretty exciting in itself. But it's kind of funny. When he does refer to those things, he always gives a caveat that it could be that more is going on and I just don't know. In fact, there's a video out there from an interview he did in Hong Kong where they were asking him. And his reply was, yeah, I didn't find anything when it came to Roswell or Area 51. However, I probably wouldn't be the first president that career staffers have lied to before. So he always gives a caveat that there could be something else going on. So that's kind of the history of Area 51 and some of the secrecy behind it and kind of the mainstream ideas or what we know about Area 51. But here I could have put whistleblower question mark because when it comes to aliens at Area 51, that idea, and really the reason Area 51 is known by everyone is this person here, Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar in 1980, or in the late 1980s, began speaking to a local news anchor and investigator, George Knapp, about how he says he worked out at Area 51, and he worked at Area 51 back engineering alien technology. So I've got a little video of one of the first interviews and stories about that, so let's look at that.
Area 51, that mysterious corner of the Nevada test site, is no longer much of a secret. The fact that secretive things go on here is a given, even to the Soviets, who make daily spy flights over the facility to take a peek at what's going on. These photos, never before shown in public, are about as close as anyone will ever come to seeing what the place looks like again. The dry bed of Groom Lake, corrugated metal buildings, a 3-mile-long runway, and some highly sophisticated radar and detection equipment. It's been known by many names over the years: Dreamland, the Ranch, the Skunk Works. If ever there was a place to test a secret new technology, this is it. And that's exactly what's been done here for decades. Area 51 is where Francis Gary Powers and the other U-2 pilots were trained in the 50s, and where the U-2 itself was developed. The SR-71 spy planes that spotted Soviet missiles in Cuba in the early 60s were also developed at 51. 51 is where stealth technology was nurtured, where Star Wars devices are still tested, and where all manner of CIA monkey business has been plotted and refined. News articles once again mention the talk about alien spacecraft, and subsequent articles in national magazines quoted unnamed sources about things of alien origin flying in Nevada, things that would make filmmaker George Lucas drool. Despite the speculation, no one who knew Area 51 from the inside ever talked publicly about the saucer stories.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
The live interview with the shadowy Dennis drew international attention. Portions were broadcast by radio in 6 European countries and in a nationally televised TV special in Japan.
Actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." And he hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is by any standards fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
Right, this came from somewhere else. I mean, as bizarre as that is to believe, but I mean, it's there. I saw it.
So there's Bob Lazar and some of his claims about what he saw out there. When he came out with this and these reports came out, they were hugely popular all over the world, and all of a sudden, practically overnight, everybody knew about Area 51. So that's what's funny. When this came out in the subsequent years up until 2013, when I went out there with the Kardashians, it was the most well-known Air Force base, but it was unacknowledged. It was secret, even though everybody knew about it until 2013. And that was all because of Bob Lazar. There are movie references. It's all over the place. Video games, books, movies, all about Area 51 and aliens because of Bob Lazar. I don't know about some of you, but before the 2013, even now, when you mention Area 51, there are a lot of people who say, "Oh, that's not real." They don't believe it. And what's not to believe about a secret Air Force base? You know, that's nothing too exciting or too strange. But because of that association with aliens, people don't believe that it's real. So I'll often show them some articles and everything. And when in 2013 the articles came out that it's finally been, it's no longer a secret, you know, I had a lot of contacts with people saying, "Oh my gosh, it was real, you were right." Well, yeah, you know, it's not that hard to find out. But there has been some debate. This is from our conference in February. The person on the left is named Jeremy Corbell, and we'll talk more about him. He's a really cool guy. He's been doing some great documentaries. He's an investigative filmmaker. He also has done a recent documentary on Bob Lazar and some more research that we'll get into, but he's also become friends with Bob Lazar, so he's a big supporter of Bob Lazar. On the right, however, we have Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman, I call him the grandfather of ufology. He is used to work as a nuclear physicist, and he has been writing about UFOs for decades. In fact, he's really the guy you could credit with the other, perhaps the even bigger UFO story than Area 51, which is Roswell. Probably the only story bigger than Area 51 is Roswell. He's the guy who back in the 70s interviewed the main witness. So a lot of people don't know this. In 1947, when this craft, whatever, crashed out in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico, the Air Force sent out a press release saying, "Hey, you know, an alien craft or a flying saucer crashed out here in the desert." The next day, they sent out another press release. "Oh, sorry, it was a mistake. It was actually a weather balloon." And so the story died at that point. It wasn't a big deal. In fact, the media didn't really pick up on it. No one picked up on it. UFO writers did not write about it. There were a couple obscure mentions until Stanton Friedman interviewed the Air Force intelligence officer who was the one who went out and looked at the debris, who many years later said, you know, that thing was not a weather balloon. That was what we said it was in the first place, a flying saucer. That's what he claimed. When Stanton Friedman then went and did some more research, he found dozens of other witnesses who said the same thing, and then a book came out. And well, actually, that comes into play later on. What's weird is all of these things kind of go together. So Stanton Friedman researched Roswell. He believes that UFOs are real. He believes we're being visited by extraterrestrials. He even believes that alien abduction could be going on. But he doesn't believe that Bob Lazar worked at Area 51. And the reason is he did some research, and he found that Bob Lazar claimed to have several degrees. Stanton Friedman did some research at these universities, and he found out, he claims that Bob Lazar never went there. There was no one who remembers him. There's no professors who remember him. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm one of those guys where it took me several different colleges and universities before I got my degree. But, you know, every one of those you're going to find professors and students who knew me, but not one remembers Bob Lazar. And that is strange. Bob Lazar says that when he came out with his story, his employment records were all wiped regarding where he worked, such as places like Los Alamos and Area 51, and that his educational records were also wiped. Stanton Friedman says that's just not possible, and a lot of people agree with Stanton Friedman. Another of his arguments is that Bob Lazar says that the UFOs ran using element 115. Element 115, and in fact, you know, it's only been recently recreated, element 115, originally by Russian scientists a few years ago. However, Bob Lazar wasn't the first one to talk about element 115. A lot of people feel that way, but it's not true. Element 115 has been talked about for many years as, like Stanton gets into, and I'm no scientist, but it's called an area of island of stability that they're looking for. They're looking for these stable nuclear elements, essentially, to use for power and other things. But as Stanton Friedman says, element 115 isn't one of those. It's got a very short half-life. It can't exist for more than a few seconds or a very short period of time. So there's no way they could have been using element 115. Bob Lazar says, no, they were using element 115. The other argument that Stanton has is that Bob Lazar, he says, doesn't talk the talk. He doesn't sound like a scientist. He doesn't talk like a scientist. He was not a scientist. But not everybody agrees with Stanton Friedman on that. A lot of people will agree that the educational research that Stanton and others have done is valid, that they can't find any record. There's no one who has come forward and said, I went to school with Bob Lazar. George Knapp understands that concern. He agrees that there's an issue here, but he still believes that there's something to the story. And at our event in February, he was there and he talked about this issue. And here's what he has to say.
Last night, as I'm running from the airport bar to my gate, I don't know if this is a sign or an omen, but right at my gate is a great big sign that says Area 1, a myth or mystery. It was an ad for the Area 51 Museum at the Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas, which sort of plays into the theme that we're going to explore here tonight. The story that we are here to review today has traveled all over the world many times. And I know that it sounds preposterous on its face. This idea of some slightly off-kilter guy in glasses that he could be hired to do classified programs, even though his educational credentials are practically non-existent, his work history is sketchy, he's been discredited and dismissed by the people he worked with and the people he worked for. There is no way that a guy like this would ever be allowed access to top-secret materials or classified files. No way. Let alone that he would subsequently be allowed to blow the whistle on some of the deepest, darkest secrets of all. Roll the video. It must not be true, right? And yet, we know that Edward Snowden really did work. We know that Edward Snowden really did work for the CIA and NSA contractors, even though he had no college degrees. He dropped out of high school. He dropped out of the military. He was working as a security guard at a college when he was hired away by the CIA. Then he later worked for private contractors, the NSA. He was given access to the most sensitive information in the entire U.S. government, which he then promptly leaked. Is it fair to talk about another bespectacled, bookwormish whistleblower and compare him to Bob Lazar? I think it is not presumptuous. I think I will take you through this twisted tale step by step, and you can tell me if the comparison is valid. Both of these men worked on classified projects for spooky agencies. Their personal lives were spotty, their educational credentials hard to document. Both of them, though, very bright guys, whose lack of former credentials was not an impediment to them getting work in places that seemingly should be off limits to them. I think Bob Lazar's story, the one you're about to hear, demonstrates that those three-letter agencies that we're going to be talking about, by the way, this is a pretty interesting video. I'll come back and explain what this is showing a little bit later. What his story demonstrates is those three-letter agencies and military intelligence will hire anyone if it means there's a better chance of getting the job done.
So he goes on in this lecture and in other places to say that he knows Bob Lazar did work at least Los Alamos and on other places at, top secret facilities. He says he knows this because many people have come forward, but they want to remain anonymous, and they've told him that he had worked there. And that's been part of the difficulty, that up until recently, everyone who had worked with him wanted to remain anonymous. But he also says he was able to confirm, he went to Los Alamos with Bob Lazar. They walked in, people knew who Bob Lazar was. He also says they found a directory of phone numbers. Bob Lazar was listed in that directory of phone numbers. People like Stanton Friedman say, well, he could have been a contractor. He was a contractor. That's what it shows. But anybody could have been a contractor. You don't know what he did there. He could have been the AV guy. He could have been a janitor. We don't know what he did there. So that makes it kind of difficult. George Knapp just has to say, I just have talked to people that confirmed to me that he worked there. The thing with George Knapp is he's won many, many awards. He's a very respected journalist. So at least it's my opinion you can trust George Knapp when he says that. But it's difficult just to go by what someone says. However, getting back to Jeremy, after the conference, released some new information. And he actually spoke to George Knapp on Coast to Coast. And I want to read what George Knapp said, because he said some things regarding what he thinks about Bob Lazar before Jeremy got into his story. He said, "For me, the key issue is whether or not Lazar really did work at Los Alamos National Lab. If he worked there in a scientific or technical position, if he had security clearances, then I think that could justify the idea that he would be hired to work at places like Area 51. So that was always a central question. Los Alamos denied he had records. This went back and forth for a couple of years. I know he was there. We've interviewed people he worked with before. None of them would come forward. We found his name in the Los Alamos phone book. We found a newspaper article with him on the front page and a picture of him saying that he was a physicist out there. We know he was there." So that's what George Knapp stance. Well, what's exciting is that finally there has been a physicist who has come forward, and Jeremy was able to find this guy. So here's what Jeremy did. He's been working on this documentary about Bob Lazar. He said he was able to create a bot which essentially scoured Facebook for the name Bob Lazar, and he would read all the posts about Bob Lazar. One of these posts said, "Hey, my neighbor says he worked with Bob Lazar." So he got a hold of that guy on Facebook, and he asked if he could be introduced to his neighbor. He got to know the neighbor. He researched the neighbor, who turned out to be legitimate, and was able to discover that this guy, did work with, or at least claimed to have worked with Bob Lazar. And so he interviewed the guy, and luckily this guy did not remain anonymous. He came forward. He essentially said, and we'll see his credentials are essentially impeccable. And he's like, I'm at the point in my life where I don't care what anybody says. I'm respected enough where I can get away with pretty much anything, and I'm retired mostly anyway, so I don't care. So he came forward. His name was Bob Kringle. He was a physicist. He worked at China Lake, Kirtland Air Force Base, Los Alamos, Sandia Labs, which is in New Mexico near Kirtland Air Force Base, another top secret facility. And he worked at the Manzano Weapons Storage Facility. This is also in Kirtland. And we're going to get into Kirtland, which is really interesting. It's part of the disinformation we're going to get into. Manzano is where essentially all of the U.S. nukes were held. There's a ton of them there. Nobody knows exactly how much, but there's supposedly like dozens and dozens of them waiting to be taken apart underground, just right outside of Albuquerque, and I'll show that to you in a minute. But Corbell asked Kringle directly if he knew Lazar to be working as a physicist at Los Alamos, to which Kringle said he was certain. This is just an article, actually, from 2002 about Bob Kringle. And this is in the New Mexico Business Journal. And it's actually New Mexico Business Weekly. It talks a lot about Kringle, and it just talks about him as kind of this eccentric genius who invented a lot of things like the laser rangefinder. He's responsible for like lasers being used by police to be able to clock us when we drive, other types of laser technologies, and just all of these different technologies this guy has been related to, and about this kind of this genius that has invented all of these things. So it's like this says, creativity more than pedigree makes a man. This guy had the pedigree, but he became such a great inventor kind of because of his eccentricities and being a creative person. So this guy's been pretty well vetted. And finally, we have this guy who is able to put Bob Lazar at Los Alamos. And he says he was in meetings such as security meetings with Bob Lazar. So they would have meetings once in a while where they would remind you, remember you guys signed paperwork that you wouldn't talk to even your colleagues about what you did. And Corbell asked, well, do you know what he did? And he said, no, he didn't know what I did. We don't know what anybody did. We're not supposed to talk to each other about what we did. But he said Lazar was a bit of a rock star because he dressed, kind of more casual, and people knew he had like this rocket car. In fact, that was the article George Knapp was referring to. It was about this rocket car that he had built and all of these other kind of crazy things that Bob Lazar had built and put together that many people talk about. Another witness is actually a friend of mine. His name is Ron Regier, and he spent the majority of his life as an aerospace engineer. He helped NASA. He worked on some of the original NASA rocket projects. He's retired now. He worked on a lot of defense projects. He's also been interested in UFOs. He's been a state director for the Mutual UFO Network, a large civilian UFO investigative organization. And he's just an interesting guy. Every time, he's just got a lot of great stories of different places he's worked and everything. And I've known him for decades, and a lot of people, George Knapp and others, have interviewed him. So he is who he says he is, and there's really no doubt he is who he says he is. But he also says he knew Bob Lazar back then. One of the people mentioned in these articles, it did mention before Bob Lazar came out that there were rumors of aliens at Area 51. One of these people that was talking about rumors of aliens at Area 51 and a lot of really crazy fringe ideas, and he still talks about crazy fringe ideas, is a local here in Las Vegas named John Lear. He's actually son of the guy who invented the Lear jet. Ron Regier and Bob Lazar were his friends. Ron says, we would hang out and talk about UFOs, and Bob Lazar would make fun of us because he didn't believe in UFOs and that stuff. That was before he went to Area 51. And John Lear is one of those people who's been, suspecting he thinks there's aliens out there at Area 51, and he was talking about this before Bob Lazar came out. So, but Ron says, when Bob came back and said, I've been working at this place called Area 51, and guys, you were right. There are aliens and UFOs. Ron says he was genuinely freaked out about it, and that he didn't work with Bob Lazar at Los Alamos, which is when he met him, or at Area 51, but Lazar had said he worked there, and Ron said, I had no reason to doubt him, because we would geek out about science and everything. He said they were working together to develop an idea for like this a bunker-busting bomb, because this is kind of, engineers do a lot of freelance work, and there are some people who will come up with an idea and then they'll sell it to a defense contracting company, and then they'll be allowed to develop it, and that's what they were going to do together. But he said, Lazar was at my level. He knew what he was talking about. And Ron Regier, along with many other scientists, will talk about how technicians or people working on these projects, they don't necessarily need to have degrees. So all of these people agree. Does he have these degrees? I don't know. But you don't have to have all these degrees to work. You just have to have the knowledge and the know-how, and that. At least Lazar knew the know-how. And just like Krangle, he said he had the knowledge. He knew what he was talking about. He was working at these places. So here's to add to the mystery, what is Bob Lazar doing now? Here's Bob Lazar at the February conference talking about that.
Tell them what you do now.
I live in the scientific bubble. That's just about it. I mean, it's my work is my life. Whether I'm working or having fun, it's pretty much the same thing. So it's, I don't know, I pretty much do the same thing.
Where you live and what you do, your business.
I unfortunately live in Michigan. And
You're glad to be in Arizona.
Yeah, I would really like to be back here. But yeah, the business is United Nuclear Scientific. We sell and build lots of scientific equipment and supplies, supply it to schools, universities, the government, everybody. We also do contract work. We do R&D work, design, construct, prototype gadgets, weird things for different companies. If they have a problem or something they're trying to solve, they'll come to me and just say, make this work. And so we do, but the bulk of it is really just selling scientific equipment and supplies, and trying to bring that back. Back when I was a kid, used to be able to go into a hobby store and buy chemicals and have a chemistry set. Now if you see any glassware in somebody's house, you just think they're cooking up meth or something like that. So, we try to change the tide and bring back hands-on stuff into, the current generation.
That's one of the stories told about you, right? That you had a meth lab, among others.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Do you have any government contracts?
We do government contracts.
You see where that could go. People, he's working for the government, they're paying him off. He did his job, spread disinformation, now he's working for the government. You're not working for the government.
No, I don't work for the government, but if there's contracts, I bid on it. And every faction of the government doesn't know what the other one's doing. It's a complete mess.
I want to give them an idea. The question is raised, you're not a scientist. What kind of scientist are you? And I haven't been to your house in Michigan, but the last time I visited you, it was in New Mexico, and there was something built in the house, the building right behind your home. It was, as I recall, a 30-foot particle accelerator.
Yeah.
You built it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you do with that? What do you do with your home particle accelerator that's 30 feet long?
Well, at the time, I was working on an efficient way of storing hydrogen for, automotive use, so it can be used as a fuel. And some of the most efficient hydrides, materials that absorb hydrogen like a sponge absorbs water, were restricted because they were used in thermonuclear hydrogen bombs. And so you couldn't purchase these materials, but there was kind of a loophole in the law where you could make them. So I had to make a particle accelerator to make the material to use and run tests on. So that's what that was all about.
So, I mean, it's an example. George Knapp saw this stuff at his house. Ron Regier saw this stuff at his house. Jeremy goes and they ride these doom buggies he builds. You know, they play with his rocket cars and all of this other stuff that he builds. So he may not talk the talk when it comes to alien propulsion or something like that, but he obviously is well versed in science. Here's a picture of his website, and this is kind of an interesting part here. He sells red hot uranium ore, very high radiation level. And he talks about how rare that is. And he actually ran into some trouble with the government over being a supplier of this sort of stuff. But he does it. I mean, he's selling all of this scientific stuff. He's got these government contracts. And of course, like George Knapp said, the question is, well, it's twofold. Okay, let's say that this guy is a whistleblower. And he revealed the big secrets that aliens are at Area 51, or at least we're back engineering alien technology, more accurately is what he says, at Area 51. Well, shouldn't he get in trouble? Snowden got in trouble. Snowden we're looking for, he's hiding out in Russia, which is, you know, ideologically people he doesn't agree with. I mean, it was the sort of thing Russia does that he was fighting against that we are doing here. But Bob Lazar is here with government contracts. Just like George says, that kind of makes it look like, you know, maybe you're in cahoots. But even if we go to the other end, if he is in cahoots with the government and they did work together, why are they lying about him working at Los Alamos? If we can prove, or it's fairly well established he worked at Los Alamos, why not tell people, yeah, he did work at Los Alamos, but he didn't work at Area 51, and we don't have aliens at Area 51. Instead, they just lie about it. So it's just, you know, you scratch your head. What the heck is going on here? Is it disinformation? Is it not? Is he telling the truth? Is he lying? There's another case. The Dodie Benowitz affair. In this case, we do know it is a disinformation scandal. Why do we know that? Because the man, the primary person here, says, I was involved with disinformation when I was working for the Air Force Office of Special Investigation in the 80s at Kirtland Air Force Base, another top secret place where they have several top secret facilities. This picture is actually from a great movie. It's a documentary called Mirage Men. And it's done by Mark Pilkington. There's another book out there by Greg Bishop called Project Beta, which is also an investigation of this case. However, I decided to do my own investigation, and we'll go through this, because those are largely dealing with interviews with Dodie and some of the other people involved. Dodie's a liar. He admits he's a liar. During my investigation, you can see he changes his story constantly. You just can't trust a word this guy says. So when I went about my investigation, I matched up what he said towards other credible sources, and we'll talk about that. But let's get into the story first. This is Kirtland Air Force Base up on the upper part of the screen here. And this, I would advise you guys, this is probably one of the most interesting areas you can explore on Google Earth anywhere in the world. The reason being is, you know, some of those secret facilities that Kringle and Ron Regier worked at are right here. So this is Manzano Mountain. You'll see, if you zoom in, you'll see that there are entrances into this mountain where there are a bunch of labs where they do secret testing and work. Some of those labs is where they used to store the nuclear warheads. You'll see things out here, like you'll see tanks on the perimeter and other security stuff. I'm not sure if it's this one or this one, but one of these peaks has a laser testing facility where they're shooting lasers off, and people see those in the Albuquerque area. This is outside Albuquerque, by the way. In fact, you see up here, Albuquerque International Sun Airport, and when you fly into that airport, you'll see Kirtland right next to it, and you'll see jets and military aircraft and stuff like that. You see these rocket sleds that are out here. They have this giant wooden structure that they test like radar or nuclear. They'll like send nuclear radiation at planes to see if they're, and other things to see how they react. There's a small nuclear device, nuclear power plant on the base where they test nuclear power plants. There's even some testimony of someone who worked there who said, when you're in the parking lot at this facility and you close your eyes, you'll see flashes of lights occasionally of the radiation that's coming out of that power plant. Just a lot of weird stuff. In fact, right out in this area is down here to the south is where Sandia Labs is, where they do more of that sort of work. So they do a lot of this sort of work here at Kirtland Air Force Base, and this is where the story starts. So the story starts with Paul Benowitz. Paul Benowitz was an engineer. He had a company where they developed kind of thermal devices. And these devices they sold to the government. They had government contracts. And up there, even right around where it says Kirtland Air Force Base, is where he lived. He had a house up there and a lab up there, and he could see over the base. Benowitz was into UFOs and aliens. In fact, in the 70s, he investigated and got to know a lot of law enforcement and even some politicians like Harrison Schmidt, who was a New Mexico representative, who was into cattle mutilation, because they did investigations because of the cattle mutilations that were happening in the 70s. Law enforcement actually got involved. The FBI, they had a big conference out there, so he got to know some of these people. But he started taking pictures and videos of what he thought were UFOs and aliens over the Manzano area. And he started talking to the security at Kirtland Air Force Base saying, hey, you guys got aliens that are flying over. You guys better be concerned. He was also getting signals that he thought were alien signals, transmission. So he was literally concerned about alien invasion and stuff like that. He went to the base. He told them, hey, you guys got a problem. The base sent out a couple people to go investigate. One of these people was sent out, even though he was kind of a scientist working on some projects. He wasn't with security, but he had worked at Project Blue Book, the Air Force's UFO investigation group, so he knew about UFO investigations. So he went. The other person that went was Richard Dodie, and he was an agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. They went out there and looked at the stuff. Now, according to Dodie, this is Dodie's story from here. Dodie says, and here you can see actually, this is Thunder Scientific Corporation. This is Paul Benowitz's company. And you see the Kirtland Air Force sign right there. They're just right next to each other. But Dodie says that when they went out and looked, they saw that he was getting telemetry and pictures of top secret projects on the base. And he said it was decided that they should tell this guy that he is getting UFOs and aliens so that he would not, so the Russians who were snooping around wouldn't suspect, wouldn't go talk to him and get what he was really getting, which was some of the information about their secret projects. He said there was a gentleman with the DEA who they gave the code name Falcon that was kind of his boss in this disinformation project, and that they did things like giving Benowitz documents that showed that aliens were real and he was being investigated. They would break into his house and rearrange his furniture so that he would believe that, you know, aliens or somebody was messing with him and looking at him. They said he would like park a truck across the street where it was obvious that they were looking at him to make him think that he was being monitored. All of this stuff that made Benowitz extremely paranoid. He started investigating, you know, alien abductions and things like that. One of the people he talked to is Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who at the time was in charge of the clinical psychology department at the University of Wyoming, who was also interested in UFOs and things like that. But he told him, you know, they worked together on a case where Dodie said, this woman said she was taken to an underground facility. I think this is in Dulce, New Mexico. Outside of it, under the Archuleta Mesa or mountain, Dodie says that he led him to believe there was a secret base in this area, that he would fly him over the area and say, look, that's probably an entrance there, and that's an entrance there. And it's been confirmed by, for instance, another state police officer in New Mexico that, you know, they would fly over and that Dodie would tell him there was a secret base there. So he became extremely paranoid. Even Dr. Sprinkle says he started really freaking out, for the lack of a better term. He would hide out in his car. Because his car was all full of metal. and he thought the aliens couldn't get into his mind and stuff if they were there. He literally had to be institutionalized a couple times until finally his family said, that's it. He was institutionalized, he was paranoid, and they said, this is, you know, you've got to dump this. We're not going to let you talk to any of these UFO people. It's over. And so at that point, he stopped talking to anybody with UFOs, and then he passed away. I can't remember the year, something like early 2000s. So it's a really sad, tragic story. And this is Dodie who's telling this story. This is where the story gets worse, and one of the reasons why this story is kind of lost to obscurity in a lot of ways. So this was his accomplice on the left, William Moore. And this is where it kind of mixes with Roswell and some of these other stories. This was William Moore's friend, Jamie Shandera, who was a Hollywood movie producer. And William Moore was an author. In fact, William Moore is the guy who wrote the book along with Charles Berlitz about Roswell, the very first book about Roswell. And they used the work of Stanton Friedman. This is Stanton Friedman, who we talked about earlier. So these guys were all working together at the time. Well, the story is, and it's my personal belief from looking at what I've seen, that William Moore is a liar as well. I mean, his story changes throughout this whole thing. But in 1989, William Moore came forward, and because some researchers, in particular Robert, he does nukes research, nuclear UFO research. I'll remember his name. No, Hastings, Robert Hastings. Robert Hastings was onto him. Robert Hastings started investigating. It was like something weird is going on here. And so in 1989, William Moore was kind of pushed forward to come out and admit that back in the early 80s, that Richard Dodie had come to me and said, I need someone on the inside. I need to know about UFO research. I need someone to go talk and feed Benowitz information on this project I'm working on, but you have to do it in secret. And if you do it, I'll give you insight into the real UFO stuff that's going on, because there really are UFOs and aliens. And Bill Moore did it. So Bill Moore started working with Benowitz to feed him information and to give him some of the documents that Dodie was creating that were hoaxed. This is the first document that Bill Moore gave to Benowitz. He gave it to him in 1981. He says that he warned Benowitz, I think that this is could be disinformation, so you might not want to spread this. But of course, to Benowitz, it was a big deal because it finally verified, oh my gosh, the government is investigating me and they know about aliens. This is the document right here, and it was called the Aquarius document. And it's got a lot of ridiculous statements, a lot of misspellings, a lot of terrible grammar, which in the early days, these documents that Dodie gave him were like this. It talks about how Benowitz is being watched, UFOs are real, that this information is being passed to NASA. From NASA, it's being passed to a group called MJ-12, and that MJ-12 are the only ones to be the holders of all of these secrets. MJ-12 now is a word that is well known in UFO mythology, and this is the first place it comes from in 1981. A document that Dodie says was fabricated. Later on, he says, like I said, he changes his story a lot. So does Bill Moore about this document. They later said that, oh, we think lots of this document's real, but some of the things were changed. So they keep changing their ideas on about this document, but it was part of Dodie's disinformation program. Another document that came forward, another one that talks about Project Aquarius for MJ-12, is this one. This is supposedly a briefing for Carter. And it says stuff about how Jesus is an alien and about how aliens have been looking into us for thousands of years. And Benowitz believed all this stuff. He really, bought it. And it just perpetuated his ideas. In fact, what's interesting is that in 1983, Some of you may know about a researcher named Linda Howe. She was really popular during this time because she did this documentary about cattle mutilation that became a really big deal. And, she became pretty famous from it. It was a great investigation. Well, Dodie invited her to Kirtland Air Force Base, and he showed her a document very similar to this that essentially had the same information. And then she left, and she was talking with HBO to do another documentary about UFOs. She told HBO about this, and HBO said, well, you can't verify any of that information. We don't want to use that. And essentially, the documentary didn't go anywhere. She believes that this document was real, even though Dodie says it, was part of their disinformation. And in my perspective, the information's pretty ridiculous. I mean, even if you look at the verbiage, it's just so poorly written. It's not like any other documents you would see out there. But Dodie at first denied that he took Linda Howe there, but later he admitted it, and he admitted she was part of his disinformation program. And it goes beyond. What's interesting is that with this whole MJ-12 mythology, a lot of people, because all of this was going in secret in the background, people like Stanton Friedman, he didn't know any of this was going on. But during this period of time, then another document, which is more well known, it's called an Eisenhower briefing, which was supposedly a briefing to Eisenhower from MJ-12. That was allegedly sent to Jamie Shandera, the guy in that picture we saw, William Moore's buddy. And it was sent to him from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is a document that is much more well written. It's much more plausible. It's much more well researched. And that is a document, like I said, that's supposedly from MJ-12, to Eisenhower about MJ-12 and how they're managing Roswell and the UFO information. They received that in 1983, but they showed it to Stanton. And Stanton wanted to investigate it. They didn't want to share it with anybody. But then some more weirdness happened, because then somebody started sharing this document with people in the UK, UFO researchers in the UK. One in particular, Jenny Randalls, was showing the document. She said, I can't verify this. I don't want anything to do with it. Another guy named Tim Good was like, oh, cool, I'm going to put this in my book that I was just about to publish. And then he also sent it to the press. And so the UK press wrote a story about it in '87, which forced then Bill Moore and Shandera and Stanton Friedman, like you see in that picture, to come out and share those documents. And that's how the MJ-12 kind of mythology got out there. But you never hear about these two documents which had it first, which were the Dodie documents. And Dodie says, I didn't have anything to do with those Shandera documents. I don't know where they came from, but they're real. I can tell you that that stuff is real. Meanwhile, he's giving Benowitz all this goofy crap back here. Interesting enough, I should say that Stanton Friedman believes MJ-12. But here's some of the hard part about that. Stanton Friedman says, well, the list of people that are part of MJ-12 are the list of people that Bill Moore and I knew were part of MJ-12. But back when he said this and when he did this investigation, he didn't know that Bill Moore was working with Dodie and that Dodie had passed along fabricated documents about MJ-12. Another thing he had did that Stanton Friedman didn't know about is he had approached a journalist and said, hey, there's this thing called MJ-12, we need to write a book about it. And the journalist, who was an Inquirer journalist, Bob Pratt, said, well, I can't verify this. I'm not writing, if we write a book, we can write a fiction book. And Bill Moore got mad and said, no, this is real. We got to write a nonfiction book. And Bob Pratt said, no, I can't do that if I can't verify it. And those records only came out fairly recently in Bob Pratt's personal notes. He had written about, how Bill Moore had approached him on this. So there's a lot of shady business going on with this. So I decided to look into this. The first thing I did was a FOIA to get Dodie's military records. Did he really work at Kirtland Air Force Base? Was he really with Air Force Office of Special Investigations? He was. So I wasn't the first to get this. I think Greg Bishop, who I mentioned, did Project Beta, got some of the records. Mine were a little different. But it showed that Richard Dodie was in the military, Air Force, from 68 to 1988. He retired as a master sergeant. From 1980 until his retirement, he's listed as working at Kirtland Air Force Base as Air Force Office of Special Investigation. There is an incident. I later found out that some documents were discovered by an investigation done by Bruce Maccabee, who was an optical physicist, a UFO researcher, who had actually investigated an alleged UFO sighting at another base. And at that base, the guy that he worked with was Dodie, and he had determined that Dodie was not being honest with him, and he didn't trust what he was being said, he was being given. And it confirms on this that Dodie was at that base as well. But I also asked the Air Force on Benowitz and the whole affair. Did they have any records of this alleged, project to feed Benowitz disinformation? What I found was interesting. It's the Air Force's side of the story. The Air Force says that indeed, Benowitz did tell us that there were UFOs and aliens that were invading our base, and we need to be worried about it. We did send Dodie out there with this other officer who is part of Project Blue Book. They looked at the material. They didn't determine it was really anything that they were too concerned about. Some of the signals they were interested in it because they didn't say why, but they were interested in some of the signals. They sent it to another department who looked at it. They didn't think much of it. Benowitz continued to say, you guys need to look at this. So they actually invited him to the base, and they had some of the scientists come in. One of these scientists had said, well, what we were concerned about is that he was getting some material regarding some of our projects. So all of these scientists went to go meet with him. He told them about the UFOs and aliens. From one of the people at the meeting, he said that they all ended up getting up and leaving until there was only a couple people left who said they would work with him on doing some more, getting a grant actually to investigate this stuff more. But essentially they were talking about, or giving the impression they were humoring him. But they determined there was nothing to it. They didn't want to, there was nothing to investigate, at least nothing to do with OSI. OSI is more law enforcement. So they do, look for more criminal things. And there was nothing there for them to look at, so they dropped it. This document's really interesting, though, because what this says is that then some of the politicians got involved. Pete Domenici, a senator from New Mexico, came to the base, which they indicate was kind of weird. He came to the base and said, I want to talk to Richard Dodie. And they're like, okay, we'll go get him. They said they asked his aide, what does he want to talk to Dodie about? He said, well, this guy, Paul Benowitz, says you guys are investigating a UFO case about UFOs over the base. Domenici, the senator, has been contacted by this scientist, and we want to know what's going on. They told him, well, nothing's going on. We decided not to investigate that. And the note says that Dodie told him that Dodie says, nope, we're not investigating this. Which is interesting because, of course, in the background, Dodie says he's giving him these documents, these fake documents. So he just lied to Pete Domenici, at least, about any involvement. Harrison Schmitt also called and said, what's going on with this? Are you guys investigating this? There's UFOs over the base or something? And they said, no, we looked at the material and we didn't find it was really any concern. He said, well, somebody should look into it, shouldn't they? And they said, maybe, but it wouldn't be us, so we can refer you to someone else. And that's the Air Force's side of the story. Again, it was Dodie who told Harrison Schmitt this. The concern being that Dodie, if according to his words, according to Moore's words, according to Benowitz's words, was passing off these documents to Benowitz, indicating these hoax documents, indicating that they were investigating him, then lied to these senators about what was going on. The MJ-12 documents, of course, one of the big concerns is that the Eisenhower documents that I was talking about, is that they came from Albuquerque, New Mexico. So the National Archives had sent the documents to the Air Force Office of Special Investigation and said, what's up with this? The only reply they got were the documents sent back to them with the big word bogus. This is literally one of the documents sent back to them without any further information. So the question is, how was this Dodie allowed to, give all of this material to Benowitz, tell him UFOs and aliens are here? Literally, the guy goes crazy. The whole time, Dodie is an agent with the Office of Special Investigations. How could they not have known? Dodie brought Linda Howe to the base. There are indications in the story that there were other of his colleagues at the base that were aware of what he was doing. For instance, there was another guy on the base that actually, because when Linda Howe landed in Albuquerque, Dodie wasn't there to meet her. So she's wondering what's going on here. She calls, and some guy answers the phone, and she's like, well, I was supposed to meet Dodie. Where is he? And he says, oh, I'm sorry. And he goes and picks her up and brings her to the base. So this guy was aware of what was going on. How could they do that? Dodie, of course, a lot of people say Dodie had to have been doing this all on his own, that this was a ruse. Maybe he was doing it with more, and they were in cahoots doing all of this. That's possible, certainly. But why didn't OSI, especially later on, why haven't they spoken about it, and how could he be doing it all alone? The other question is, like Dodie says, well, maybe he wasn't doing it alone. Maybe he was tasked to do this. If that's the case, then the government, this is a disinformation program that was done by the government, and they made this Benowitz go crazy. So the question is, what's going on? Meanwhile, Dodie is still out there, and he's actually a police officer, a state police officer in New Mexico. And he's still telling lots of wild tales about UFOs and aliens landing, and the government's knowing about it, and all of this really wild stuff. I have a video on YouTube where I go over, it's a half-hour long, all the details of this case. And there's also an article online, because I sent a letter to the Air Force. I was working with their PR agency to get those documents, or their PR group. But then once I got the documents, even though they said they were going to give me an official response about Dodie and whether or not he was doing this sanctioned or not, they never did. They just stopped talking to me. They just said, we gave you enough, we're done. But it's my argument that they need to answer. They need to tell us, was Dodie sanctioned to do this? Because a man went crazy, and he was, like John Alexander, he's a local here in Las Vegas. He helped me with this document. And his argument is that Dodie admitted conducting illegal acts, hoaxing documents, breaking into Benowitz's houses. That's illegal. The government can't do that, nor can Dodie do that on his own. So that they need to answer for that, and they need to have an answer. But unfortunately, they don't feel they have to have an answer. And at least I don't have the clout to get an answer for them. So I do have this letter online, and I invite anybody to go document or write your own letter, or just send mine to them, maybe if we harass them enough. So we know this is a disinformation scandal, Dodie. But here I do a comparison. So they were both government workers. Bob Lazar was a contractor, whereas Richard Dodie was an OSI agent. They both worked at top secret facilities. They both allegedly shared top secret information. Dodie changes his story. He says, oh, it's not all real. It is real. Some of it's real. None of it's real. Changes his story all the time. The good thing about Lazar is that he's stuck with his story the entire time. Neither of them have definitive proof of any of their UFO or alien claims. Lazar has a lot of evidence that's starting to bolster that he really did work at Los Alamos, but he has no definitive proof that he worked on UFOs or alien technology. Neither does Dodie. In fact, one interesting thing about both cases is you don't have anybody else coming out and saying, yeah, Dodie and I both worked on these projects, or anyone coming out and saying, yeah, Bob and I both worked on these UFOs. Even though, like this says, neither of them were officially reprimanded. Dodie did get in trouble, and his records show that later on, I can't remember, 86 or something like that, but it was later on in his career, he got in trouble and he got a demotion of sorts. The way John Alexander puts it is he was demoted to a level where this would be the guy that would kind of serve you at the officers club. He'd be the guy to go get your ping pong clubs. So he got in trouble. Whether it's regarding all of this affair, we don't know, because they wouldn't share that with me. They said they can't share any legal kind of issues. Dodie says, just like with a lot of his stories, there's all this big cloak and dagger kind of thing. Oh, I was off doing this, this spook work, and I had an informant, and the government didn't want him to protect him, and I thought we needed to protect him, so I had to do some things to protect my informant that my superiors got upset with me, and so I got demoted. Doesn't ring true, but this is also interesting. So, you know, Lazar not only doesn't get, Lazar says he got in trouble and that he got not necessarily fired, but he couldn't work at Area 51 anymore, and they erased his records. But he now has government contracts, so he's still working with the government. And then, you know, Dodie's working with the police force, so he's still working in an official manner. And what's really interesting about both of these is both of these claims have become the backbone of UFO mythology. With Bob Lazar, Area 51, aliens at Area 51, which is a big part of the UFO mythology out there. With Dodie, he's got links to Majestic 12, an alien base at Dulce, all of these, Project Aquarius, Eisenhower briefing, Carter briefing, a lot of the UFO mythology that comes out there, which kind of gets to, I love this picture I found, because this is how I feel, that, you know, when I began investigating these alleged truths, I found that they were all built on lies. And when you get into the minutia of all of these, which you have to do when you're doing an investigation to find out how credible these are, because some cases, like Travis Walton, you know, you have a lot of credible people. Some cases like Roswell, you have a lot of very credible witnesses to rely on. But cases like these, well, at least with especially Dodie, is based on lies. Bob Lazar, the only lie maybe that he might have been caught on in is his educational background. Personally, I find it hard to believe that people wouldn't be able to find his you know, colleagues at the schools he went to. But a lot of people argue, so what? In fact, at the UFO conference, some guy stood up and said, raise your hand if you haven't lied on your resume before. I've lied on every one of my resumes. A lot of people do that. They figure at least half the people, if not more, do that. I have never lied on my resume. But, you know, that could be it. You know, bolstering his resume. Who knows? And so that could be the case. From Stanton's point of view, you know, if he lied about his education, you can't trust him on anything. But the problem is, Stanton, who I love to death, he's a good friend and we argue about this all the time. If you say that with Lazar, why don't you say that with Dodie? Because Stanton says Majestic 12 is real. Well, if Dodie lied about all this stuff, and he's the guy who invented, or at least is the guy, and not only that, if Dodie was only an OSI agent for like a year before he was entrusted with the biggest government secret there is, that there's a secret organization, and then he goes out there and blabs it, that doesn't really fit. So you got to apply those to both sides. This clip pertains to what we're talking about. However, I forgot what's in it. So let's both find out.
You regret it. I mean, we heard a little bit of it. At times, you certainly regret it. Because it certainly
You know,
has
but
changed
from
your
a-
life. I mean, it's changed you.
Yeah, it has.
It's not good. This is not
No,
good.
I mean, that's what's kind of entertaining to me. People, you know, they come, oh, you made up some story. I bet you're making all kinds of money. I'm like, where? I want my cut. But no, you know, to be honest, I did have I did have the opportunity. I mean, New Line Studios in Columbia, you know, when they heard all this, I mean, the president of Columbia Pictures came down and, you were there, right? Yeah. And he said, we're doing this, and, you know, and they started giving me screenplays, and no, you know. It was just a James Bond movie. They had me running over the tops of cars. It's like look, either you tell the story how it happened, or leave me out and just make up a UFO story. But you can't. It has to be exactly what happened. And so it was just constantly everything being turned down. And it's like, you know what? We're not doing it.
So, which is another monkey wrench in the whole thing. What did Lazar have to gain? Really nothing. He didn't have anything to gain. He doesn't like talking about this. He doesn't like coming to the conferences. He doesn't go to the conferences. The only reason he came to ours is because we're friends with Knapp, and Knapp trusts us and was able to talk him into it. He didn't want to come to our conference. A few weeks before, he said, I'm not going to go. And we were like, well, we just sold a bunch of tickets, and you wrote a contract that you would do it. So he even says in this video, he says, I didn't want to go, but they told me they were going to sue me if I didn't come. And George Knapp said, well, in a nice way, right? But it was friendlier than that. It was just like, hey, you can't leave us hanging like that. And he says he genuinely didn't realize there were so many people. That room had standing room only with like 1,500 people in it that were just fascinated with what he had to say. This is at our UFO Congress plug, by the way, that we hold every February in the Phoenix, Arizona area. But he said, he was like, you know, you have 20 to 50 people there. What does it matter if you don't have one more speaker? He didn't realize that everybody there was mostly, they wanted to see him. That was the one talk they weren't going to miss. And so the room was packed. So luckily he did come. He snuck in and snuck out and was gone. So WTF. I mean, this is how I feel about both of these cases. Was Dodie working alone? Was he working with others? Was Lazar working alone, or was he working with others? Was Lazar a government disinformationist? I mean, some people think, well, okay, Lazar was working at Los Alamos. He came up with this crazy story. He wasn't reprimanded. He's got government contracts, kind of like Knapp was talking about. He must have been playing his role, misinforming people. But what did he have to gain, really, in that? And what did they do? Like Dodie says, you know, nobody believed Area 51 existed because of the alien implication. Even now, there's people who don't believe it because of the alien implications. Was that the idea? Is that so people wouldn't take Area 51 seriously and go nosing around? That didn't work too well. I was there with the Kardashians, and behind us were 4 or 5 huge, SUVs full of cameramen and everything. And of course, lots of people have been out there, and movies were made. So I don't know. I don't know what it was. I think there's a lot of questions, though. Here's a picture of. I got to have a selfie with them as we shuffled them out, because we shuffled them in and out just very quickly. And so I don't know. I'm not saying that Bob Lazar was certainly part of disinformation. His claims are really hard to swallow. No one else has come forward to say they've also worked with him. We haven't seen this alleged technology that he's worked on. At the same time, he did work at Los Alamos, it appears, and the government lied about that. But we do have records of disinformation programs that had happened, or at least we have the Dodie situation. Was he working? It's hard to think of Dodie working alone to produce all of that, but maybe he was. So I don't know. Thank you very much. Just before I'm done, I'll mention OpenMinds.tv. We run a website where we put up UFO news daily on a daily basis. We also have our UFO Congress, like we talked about. This year it's the 17th to the 22nd, 2015. We have a podcast that we do weekly, and we have a UFO report, which is a weekly webcast on YouTube that we put up. And this was when we released the information about Jeremy Corbell, and we have an interview with him about that guy he found that worked with Bob Lazar. So are there any questions?
If you agree that Bob Lazar is a disinformation agent, I have a lot of respect for George Knapp.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for George Knapp, that story wouldn't have been told. So do you then take it up a notch and saying that George Knapp was in on it or George Knapp had something to do with it? I don't want to say that.
Was George Knapp into it? Have you met him?
No, I haven't.
He's a very Weasley. No, I'm kidding. George Knapp is awesome.
That's what I'm saying. I can't.
I trust George Knapp pretty much implicitly.
Right.
However, he's a journalist, as I am. It would be, or, we do our website. It'd be very easy. If you wanted to get a story out there like this, you came with me to the story. I don't know whether you're telling the truth or not, but I'm going to write the story.
But you would investigate it.
I would
The
investigate
first thing
it.
you would look at,
And so did George Knapp.
Right, but I talked to my wife about it. I said, if he lied about his education, the first thing to do is he a scientist? Does he have his credentials? Where is that his academic record?
Right, what are his
Why don't you have his grades from
Yeah.
MIT or wherever he said he went? And George
Right.
Knapp, I've heard him speak about it, and it's just,
George Knapp, I can't speak for George Knapp, but from what I understand, he doesn't have any proof of his educational background, Bob Lazar's background either. But when you look at George Knapp and what he was faced with as a journalist, whether or not to write this story, he's got this guy that comes to him making these wild claims. He can't prove his educational background, but when George Knapp checks with Los Alamos, for instance, they say, nope, he didn't work here. Yet when George Knapp does the investigation, he finds he did work there. He finds that, other people knew he worked there. So I think that's enough to say, wow, there is a little bit of credibility to this guy's story. It's at least worth sharing with people. And I agree with him. I think that's a story worth printing. But not every editor out there is going to agree. Certainly more conservative papers back then and in the 90s, which I think was kind of the dark ages of ufology, people didn't want to touch it. These days, people will write anything about anything, like the ABC we talked about before we talked, ABC printing these fake pictures of UFOs and without doing any research. So now sensationalism and tabloid kind of journalism is taking over in the, dare I say, Trump era of, of news media. But so I think that, it's a story worth printing with what he had. So I don't fault George Knapp for printing that. I think that given what we've gone through here, there's a genuine mystery here that deserves being explored. Because at the very least, if Lazar is lying, why, that doesn't justify Los Alamos lying. Why did they lie? And that's a story. Even if they came out and said, sorry, we got it wrong, we didn't see his records, here's what he did. They obviously have a record somewhere of what he did. Why don't they share it? So I think that makes it a legitimate story, and I don't think then that makes George Knapp a disinformationist, let alone with the body of work that he's got on various topics. Any other questions? Yes?
Question on Twitter. Somebody thought Lazar was S4, not 51.
Oh, well, that is getting into some of the minutia, and George Knapp did mention it. So everybody says Area 51, and it was Area 51 that became popular because of Bob Lazar. But getting into the details of what Bob Lazar claims is that he was flown into Area 51, and then he was bused to the south near Papoose Lake, where there was an underground facility called S4, and that's where he did his work. And that was an even more super secret facility that only had, I think he said there was only like 20 people that worked in his area. So yeah, that is accurate that, and some people will say, oh, it's not Area 51, it's S4. Well, generally we say Area 51, but technically it was S4, but he worked through, Area 51. Yes?
The fact that that no one else has come forward and said anything similar to what he said, they've observed how much his life has been ruined, and so that doesn't really encourage anybody to sort of corroborate with the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think of all the people who are not scientists who work at that base, the janitors,
Mm-hmm.
the roofers, the people who lay the tar on the You know, just the general people who just work there, the lady who cleans the toilets.
Yeah.
You know, none of those people are talking about it either.
Yeah, which is great because your point, there's a dichotomy to your point. At the one hand, you can see scientists not coming forward because look what Bob Lazar went through, all of this attention, and it can't be positive, and nobody wants to, and there are other situations. We were talking earlier about a story we've done on this Homeland Security video from Puerto Rico. Even the experts who are talking about have nothing to do with it, want to remain anonymous because they have top secret clearances and they don't want to put those at jeopardy at all because that hurts their career. So yeah, nobody wants to attach their name, especially if they have a top secret clearance, to this because it could jeopardize their career. So you can see why other scientists wouldn't come forward. But then as you mentioned, what about the janitors? What about the other non-technical employees? Why haven't they come forward? They have less to risk. So I think that's a great point in the dichotomy of this whole thing. At the one hand, you can see why the scientists haven't come forward. On the other hand, why haven't any of these other people come forward? And I think that's an excellent point. And it's one of the other things that make you scratch your head about all of this. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. Hopefully you've been through the Area 51 exhibit. Definitely check that out in the rest of the museum if you haven't.